So I have also one application on FlatHub, and my motivation was just I'm using Linux, so I wanted to distribute application for Linux, and FlatHub is like nice environment for that, and I like also the idea to have like web page with list of all applications like store, and the other distribution doesn't have that web page. Like if you have RPM or Debian package, this is like a problem for me that it is like many places to look for some application. So I wanted to distribute my application, and I chose FlatHub for that purpose.
Okay, so I think my mic is too low now. Turn me back up. Hello, hello, hello. Yep, that's good. Okay, so question 2. How does FlatHub compare to other distribution platforms regarding the developer experience? Well, I guess so, yeah, given that it's part of the deal.
Yeah, just before I explain why I started using FlatHub Flatpak, which was distributing my apps to everyone, essentially, or as many people as possible with minimum effort. But as I continued working on FlatHub and Flatpak distribution, I realized all the advantage of Flatpak. I was a bit hesitant before that, but then I realized isolation is incredibly useful. We just published an app yesterday called Dino, and there is a CVE in one of its dependencies, and it's extremely complicated for various reasons to fix it, or non-trivial to fix it in distribution, because of dependencies of dependencies of dependencies. And because the Flatpak is isolated, we could patch a dependency directly in the package and fix that CVE. And yeah, it was the first distribution of Dino to fix that CVE. Also, I make an other app called Junction that does a bunch of magic. And I was able to patch glib directly in my app without touching the rest of the ecosystem, and enable this one thing I needed to have that I wouldn't be able to do on regular distribution because it doesn't have any sort of isolation. So in that regard, extremely useful compared to what I know in other places. Yeah.
Thank you. So my desktop is mostly running Flatpaks, user side installed. Maybe you know Micro's desktop, I guess, if you heard about it. So that's my daily driver. I really appreciate the fact that, essentially base system is clean. I have the minimal installation of GNOME and everything else is living in the home directory. My system is relatively clean. It's, for maintenance purpose, I don't have to install this machine as often as some other systems, because the cleanup is as simple as cleaning up the home dir, right? So that, also the initial experience, you install something, and then basically after initial setup, everything's being pulled fresh to the system. It's also kind of really nice user experience, which moves most of the installation to the first boot rather than the installation process of the base system. That kind of I really like from other, not distribution systems too.
I think one of the most appealing reasons is that you can use dependencies that are not released yet somehow. A lot of applications in the early days of GTK4 were able to try it and give a release out, which is something you cannot do in the traditional distribution method because you need a stable version of the library first, and that's something very interesting.
So about the development experience, I can tell quickly about my development experience with FlatHub, Flatpak. I'm not sure how technical this should get into, but there are lots of details when crafting a Flatpak sandbox, and it is a bit difficult to find proper documentation on these details. Even though there is documentation online published about like Flatpak manifests and whatnot, that's also the experience of other people I heard from, for example, the OBS Studio community. I also find a little bit hard to figure out what needs to happen on the manifest side to get a clean build, etc. On the FlatHub side, well, at least for my use case, which I'm thinking mostly about OBS Studio, not on the GNOME apps that I work on, because those are simpler to publish and etc. But on OB Studio, the main thing that FlatHub has that is very valuable is the publishing pipeline that we managed to figure out on GitHub. So OBS Studio developers publish a release on GitHub, and an automatic pipeline runs and publishes directly to either FlatHub and/or FlatHub beta. Sorry. Right now, it is a tad bit manual to do that because we have to like spawn some OS3 invocations, and it's kind of annoying. So hopefully, in the future, we'd have like a FlatHub specific action that we can just plug in a Flatpak build, and it would output a Flatpak deployment on FlatHub, instead of checking if the image size is correct, check if the metadata is right, and do all of that using OS3, and kind of annoying. I think that's it for me.
Hi, I'm a Debian and Ubuntu developer. So instead of developing apps myself, I package existing apps. Debian is a very decentralized project. There's nobody in charge deciding this is the way we're going to do things, and so that makes something as simple as building a Debian package quite complicated, because you look for advice on how to do this if you're new to it. And there's so many different ways of building packages and so many things that could go wrong. I'm more experienced with Snap packages. So with Snap, it's nice that there's a single step to build a package that it's just, you don't have to worry about all the complexity. And I imagine the same idea applies with Flatpak also.
Hi. I develop a few Flutter packages and release them via FlatHub. Unfortunately, with Flutter specifically, the way to publish on FlatHub is not really documented. All the documentation for Flutter is Snap specific. And one unfortunate aspect of releasing Flutter apps on FlatHub is that Flutter builds are dependent on an online connection. So if you want to build client-side, you can't really do that with Flutter. So the solution right now is to pre-build binaries and then release them via FlatHub. So that's unfortunate. Also, it's not really documented, and the pipelines there are not really not as smooth as releasing for Android, for example, or for iOS, where you have tools that help with build automation, with publishing automation. It doesn't really seem like there's anything like that for FlatHub right now. And in general, if you want to package Flutter apps for FlatHub, you kind of have to do a lot of research yourself on how to do it and figure it out yourself. So just the documentation side of things could be improved, and of course, but that's on Flutter's side, the online dependency.
Talking about Android and iOS distribution platforms, which is what I'm familiar with beside FlatHub. in that same category. One thing I really appreciate is the low friction to publish on FlatHub. It's not perfect, but compared to Android and iOS, which ask you 1,000 different questions, ask you to pay this, to check that, to agree to this terms and condition and this other one. On the first release of an app, it takes 2 days work to publish it because you also need to make the screenshot like this and write the text for this. It's insane. So that's something I really appreciate with FlatHub, very low friction. On the other hand, it's very difficult to automate updates. So there's this tool called Flatpak X module checker thing. But what it does is it automatically check if there is a new release of a package, right? I don't want to do this. I want to run some script in my development repository that will update the FlatHub, the FlatHub repository. But that's not possible now because we need to open a pull request, so it would have to open a pull request and then manually merge it. It makes automation for the developer a bit difficult. Yeah, so that's something I would really like to see as an improvement. But that's minor. The friction is incredibly low. Yeah.
Cool, very cool. I think somewhere in the plan for this year, I shouldn't really tell you. Come talk tomorrow, you'll hear about our plans. So how has publishing applications on FlatHub impacted your strategy for development and distribution? Amazingly.
Yeah, because I can speak maybe not super officially, but half officially on behalf of the OBS community. In the past, the only official way to get OBS was through a PPA on Debian, on Ubuntu specifically. It wouldn't work on Debian. I think that's still the case for the PPA validity, but now we have a comprehensive build with features that are not enabled in any other Linux build. We have an official build, the FlatHub build, which has features that are not enabled in any other particular build because they require like secret tokens on GitHub and whatnot. So how it impacted the development and distribution strategy, it impacted that it enabled that. that's the impact first and foremost, I think.
Maybe, I'm not sure if it's the right take on the question, but basically the fact that people, so I'm one of the release managers from OpenSUSE, and we actually have to now pay attention to Flatpaks, right? We have 2 distributions and we are setting up new lib16 in the next few months. And we really have to respect that there is a demand for Flatpaks, and we will have actually 2 spins. One will be with Flatpak enabled desktop, right? Out of the box, Firefox coming from FlatHub, which is what we do on Micro as desktop right now. And the other is traditional system, and I can see a rising popularity on both. So if you would ask me, like, we have to really pay attention, we have to deliver what users are asking for, which is also Flatpak-based distribution. And I'm really happy that we are using FlatHub in that case, because I see a lot of potential for maybe contributing to the gatekeeping process and so on, rather than every distribution does it by its own. But I'm also aware that we are supporting building Flatpaks in OBS, which kind of suggests that maybe in the future we would build it on our own. But right now we take it from FlatHub, and I do really like that.
Well, I wouldn't say I have a strategy, but rather, whatever I can do on my free time. Before FlatHub, before I published the FlatHub, I essentially wanted to use all the nice features that would be provided by the platform. In the case of the app I have in mind, it's the GNOME platform. and I always had to wait for the new APIs to be available in various distribution, in this case Arch, because that's what I cared about. It was a bit annoying and frustrating, especially because I wanted to move fast and improve things quickly, and yeah, also contributed to some stuff in the platform that I had, my own stuff that I had to wait then to be able to use in my apps. Now, because the platform or the libraries or whatever is bundled directly with the things, I can do it on my own terms, publishing my app, rather than waiting for distribution for various reasons. And so I found it way less stressful, actually. Yeah, because I can just do it on the weekend, any weekend, yeah.
I also find it incredibly useful that you can build any system component, like even bigger ones, super easily, like just adding it to the manifest and be done, which is very hard in many distribution cases, as far as I'm aware.
For me personally, the distribution strategy didn't change. So I distribute application on Windows, in FlatHub and in Fedora, and I do it the same also after using Flatpak, so and FlatHub. But the application is very small, so it's nothing complex.
Okay, so have you received any feedback from users regarding the FlatHub distribution of your application? And if so, what was the feedback?
Yeah, I had one feedback was Flatpak is crashing, and it was obviously some problem with distribution. And the second feedback was actually the feature. So I restricted application to access just home folder, and yeah, users expect to access network storage from the application. So and I'm still not sure what to set into it correctly. So maybe I will stop after the talk.
User feedback?
There was feedback, I can tell you. So, I think I'm gonna be speaking mostly about OBS Studio because it's a large project. It has, at the very least, on Linux, 40,000 users from what we see, from the numbers we see on FlatHub, probably more. And on Windows, it has more than, it's a 7-digit number at the very least, so it's a pretty big application. So feedback, it's an interesting topic. OB Studio does beta releases and then RC releases, more or less like GNOME. So it gathers feedback from beta and then it has a beta channel that people can test before an actual release. In the past, there was no feedback from Linux users because the beta channels were only for Mac and Windows. FlatHub Beta allows us to gather any feedback on Linux before the actual release of the application. And the feedback, well, feedback specific to ops is probably not relevant, but the feedback, the meta feedback about Flatpak is that it enables feedback. And then people can find bugs and whatnot, and that's fantastic. Quality of OB Studio on Linux improved vastly after this. It's still kind of a shame that, sorry, I used the wrong wording. From what I see, this is very not representative, but the majority of beta users are not on Ubuntu. They are on not Ubuntu. They are using literally everything else, which is pretty not representative of the wider community. So for them, grabbing a Flatpak is easy. The feedback that they share usually is around like extensions. It is difficult to find extensions using the command line. ObStudio has plugins, so on GNOME software you see a add-ons section with lots of different plugins with different features, and users usually find that hard to, usually it's hard for them to figure that out, that there's a separate plugin mechanism on top of ObStudio plugin mechanism. Is this relevant? Should I continue? Well, let's give people a chance to talk.
I think it probably goes a bit more into Flatpak than FlatHub, but I mean, obviously, this is the whole stack. But
yeah, well, most of the people who use the beta version of ObStudio, for example, they already have FlatHub pre-configured on their computers. So they either use a distribution that has that enabled, not the beta version, but FlatHub already enabled, so they get to know ObStudio very easily and smoothly, for example, through GNOME software or KDE Discover. This is a bit surprising to me because I would expect more people to come from Ubuntu, for example, but they don't seem very active on, at least on the support channels of ObStudio. Yeah, basically FlatHub enabled beta testing. That's the feedback I have from users.
Yeah, in a similar note, I also felt that I had like a shorter feedback loop with distributors because of the fragmentation problem. I always had this issue that users wanted to consume features that were not yet available on their distros, or sometimes were not even making to the distros because there was the stack was very coupled with other applications. So, for example, Virt Manager uses the same stack as GNOME boxes. So, oftentimes a feature that you enable in Virt Manager is not going to work in boxes, and vice versa. And by decoupling those things, users are now able to just consume the app as I envision. And this is a feedback that I often get. I even had users telling me that they used to switch to Fedora to have a better boxes experience, and now they can actually consume boxes in their own distro because with Flatpak, that doesn't even matter anymore.
We have nearly 25 maximum more minutes. Well, 23 actually.
Okay. So, here's one. Do you currently or plan to accept payments or donations or subscriptions for your app? And which do you prefer and why?
So currently I accept, I'm using LiberaPay for quick donations. I would like, I know that FlatHub is planning to introduce a payment system. I'm not exactly sure how that's going to work. So far, I think my favorite way of dealing with payments is what Elementary OS does, which is pay what you want, basically, but you have a set price. But if a person doesn't want to pay it or doesn't have the means to pay that, they can set their own price or just download it for free. And I think that's probably the most straightforward way, rather than asking vaguely for donations without suggesting a specific price or other things that I've seen that I don't think have worked very well. So that's what I prefer.
Hello. Yeah. I do not plan to accept payment, donation, or subscription for downloading my app directly. And the reason for that is because I want users to use the FlatHub version of my app. And I'm afraid that if there's payment involved, maybe not if it's donation, but at least payment or subscription, which I'm interested in, they will go with the free distribution of the app, which I cannot prevent because it's free software. And I'm happy, actually, that I cannot prevent that. What I've had in mind recently is to put the support forum, tracker, whatever, behind subscription. So I distribute the app for free, but the support does not come for free because it takes a lot of my time, whereas the software I can distribute at zero cost to me, especially on FlatHub. So I would be really interested if there was a subscription option in FlatHub, not for the software itself, but that would give me some kind of token, whatever, that, and then some API that I can then use on custom software to check if this is a paid user or a user that contributes financially. Yeah.
Any other thoughts about payments? Subscriptions versus donations versus anything?
I am planning to accept donations probably through subscriptions on one of my little apps that is not neither a GNOME app, like it's a personal app. It's not a GNOME app nor App Studio, just not mine. Still not sure if it's going to be just donations or subscription nor how much, but that's something that's been floating on my mind.
But like a subscription like this kind of Patreon model where you just sort of pay a little bit to support the development. So.
Yeah, currently I'm using LiberaPay as donation platform, and yeah, it's on FlatHub already. And I don't plan subscription or any payments.
Okay. So I guess we've already had a sort of half answer to this question. But would you offer additional content or functionality or releases to paid supporters of your app on FlatHub? One strong yes. And what brings you to this decision, Bob?
Well, I certainly not planning that. I think this is interesting for people who are doing that. So if FlatHub doesn't provide that functionality, you don't find people who is using FlatHub for that functionality. So if there isn't function, there isn't customer.
So I would not offer additional content to paid supporters. I guess there are two ways to do this in open source. Either have an open core model where the additional content is closed source, which I don't want to do because I want to release all of the entire app as open source. Or if it wasn't that way, then that encourages people to basically use forks or copies with the copied additional content available for free. So I would prefer to not have that duality and just offer everything for, as I said in the previous question, ideally a pay what you want model. If you choose to pay, then you get that content. But if you can't pay, that's okay too. You can download it for free.
Thanks. Yeah, to add to what I said previously about, basically answer that question, but maybe I can add some more things. I would consider offering them nightly or beta or early release access, because that's not easily, you can't find it easily on other source than there, except maybe on Arch or repository or whatever. But I know that they wouldn't most likely not try to build it themselves and have missing dependencies and so on. So in this case, I would probably do it. I would also be interested if it came at very little cost to me, for example, like time-wise. For example, if there was some kind of service, maybe a third-party service that had access to some FlatHub API that could automatically ship a sticker of my app icon or whatever. I'm not saying you should do that, but if it was possible to build such service, I might consider doing that for everyone and myself. Yeah, something like this that automatically ships a sticker of the app icon if the user has donated more than X, something like this, or a T-shirt, or you know, whatever. I think that'd be pretty cool. Yeah.
Automated swag distribution service. So, yeah.
Correct.
It's not currently on the roadmap. Okay, that's cool. Anything else about sort of additional content or supported content or features?
I do not plan on offering content nor functionality. I may consider offering convenience, like extra builds, nightly builds, for example. Assuming people could get these builds by themselves, so just offering the convenience of building for them. And I would definitely offer support or some sort of prioritization for the people who subscribe to whatever app I publish.
So this is kind of about what FlatHub helps you do with money that you've collected, which obviously gets you into tax and legal and all of this stuff. But if we get to know sort of how people think about raising funds through the application, so the sponsorship or donations or things, do people just see that as, well, paying for their time, so living costs and things? Do they see that as for the project, so project expenses, so hosting equipment or travel, outsourcing development or design or other work? So how do people feel, how do people think about this? Or more broadly, where should the money go, right? Or where should we help you take the money?
Definitely, that's going to be living costs and paying other people to work on the app, on whatever app I publish. So increasing the network of people contributing to free software.
Yeah, so in the same line as increasing the network of people contributing to free software, I would like to be able to distribute the funds equally or proportionally to the stack underneath. So I'm relying in the shoulders of giants, and I would like to be able to compensate them for providing the APIs that I use.
In the case
so
of
I would I work on my apps in my free time. I don't currently make a living out of them, off of them, but I'd like to. So it would be great if I was able to make enough to replace my job and to be able to devote my work time to these projects. That would be, I guess, priority number one. I can also imagine, though, accepting funds for specific things. So an example of something that came up before, my apps are cross-platform, but I don't release for Apple Apple devices because they require you to pay a yearly fee of, I think, $100 or euros for their Apple developer network that you need to be in if you want to release on the App Store. So that would be potentially something that I could raise funds for, or other initiatives like that if people were interested enough in a specific feature or some specific things, it would be possible to raise funds specifically for that.
Good on this one. So, are there specific features or improvements you'd like to see added to FlatHub for the benefit of application developers? I mean, I guess that's not already been discussed because we've mentioned a couple. I think we're on track.
So yeah, I would like to have more detailed metrics. I would like to have an idea who my user base is, which platforms they are, and how they are consuming my software.
I see some potential in integration with, I don't know, like our OpenQA results. If you test your specific software on our system, I feel like that would be really cool to somehow interlink these. And that would be interesting for Ubuntu or potentially any other distribution too. So we could actually, even when indirectly, help to test out the application on as many platforms as possible.
I would like to see some variant of FlatHub for mobile devices. You know, nowadays you have PinePhone with Phosh, and you want to run something in Flatpak maybe. Nowadays the applications on the FlatHub are mostly desktop-centric, so the mobile branch would be very nice. So there are already some changes related to running Flatpak on Sailfish OS. So some extra, I don't know, branch would be great.
So we put together a proposal for software.opensuse.org. We did this in a community meeting, and we ended up calling it a dyad proposal. It hasn't really moved forward, but we have tons of ideas that we put in there, and some of it was like really looking at FlatHub as some social aspect, including some documentation, ratings, things like that. So just creating a network around FlatHub might be something that could look at. And I'll forward that to you so you can at least take a look at it.
Okay. Test? Oh yeah. I would like that libAppStream port done so that we don't lose the metadata. That'd be very nice.
Yeah, related to filtering for mobile applications, right?
So one of the things that I know that are being worked on is independence from GitHub, which I would really appreciate. For example, being able to use GitLab or your own GitLab instance or other potential Git repositories seem like a step forward. Another thing that I ran into recently, I was looking at build automation, and one of the things that, for example, GitHub offers is GitHub Actions, which allow you to build inside a specific Linux VM. They're limited to x86 Linux virtual machines, and it might be nice for someone who's developing a Flutter app. So I have to precompile these binaries to be able to precompile them for other platforms, platforms other than x86. So, for example, ARM, but maybe in the future also RISC-V, for example, platforms like that. I know that this is maybe beyond the scope of FlatHub, but it came to my mind.
Yeah, no, I mean that's one of the things. So we are working on that idea of being able to upload directly. So then you have your own build pipeline. So presumably you can build a Flutter app in a GitHub action, right? Then you could have the FlatHub uploader step at the end. And then the obvious problem then is that our ARM and any other system goes to zero, basically, because our beloved build bot, for all of its intricacies, does build on ARM. So yeah, I think it was something we need to think about. So what would you or your organization do to improve FlatHub further? That's not that different to the previous question, but if that inspires any other answers.
I mean, like from the design team side, we've wanted proper curation for a very, very long time, and I would be very happy to help with that if the technical side of that sort of like was in place. Yeah.
Can you define curation a bit more, as in more?
Yeah, as in like, you know, the worst apps not showing up on the homepage all the time, and like the good apps showing up there more often, like maybe lists of like whatever, like best web development apps, like any kind of like sort of making sure that the best parts of the platform are more visible and the less good parts are less visible.
Yeah, I'm not sure I was very clear early on, earlier, just so kind of to repeat myself. If the APIs allowed it, I would be very interested in doing this automatic sticker shipping thing for paid users, not just for myself, but as a service to other developers. Of course, I would take a cut, but yeah, something like this, yeah.
Thank you. My Ops Studio contributor hat on. We're probably going to be the first ones to use whatever new shiny thing FlatHub people want to test and implement and deploy. And we are also actively contributing to like helping with the implementation of this, whatever features are needed to get Ops Studio on FlatHub the best way we can in any capacity.
Cool. I think that is it. Thanks so much, everyone, for your time. Sorry about the technical problems at the start, but very, very much appreciated. That's at least somehow reassuring that I don't think the plan is terribly wrong, but there are some incremental tweaks we can make, so that's good. There is the FlatHub panel after the lunch break. If you have any questions, then please write those on the board downstairs. And tomorrow, George Castro and I will be sort of giving an update on FlatHub, you know, year to date and plans for the remainder of the year. So hope to see you there. Thanks so much.
one. Hey, hey, hey.
Is this one working?
Well, thank you. Thank you, Lucy. So, hi everyone. Thank you for coming back. Now we are going to talk about bringing Windows applications to Linux app stores with wine snaps. I'm going to leave the floor to Lucy Hluelen and also Merlin Sebrecht. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, my name is Merlin. I am part of the core Snapcrafters team, and I'm also part of the Ubuntu Community Council. During my day job, I teach at Kent University, and I'm a researcher at IMEC.
I'm Lucy. I'm a core Snapcrafter. In other work I do, I sit on the Ubuntu membership board. We approve new Ubuntu members for sustained and significant contributions to the Ubuntu community. I'm a Microsoft MVP based on WSL work, and I have lots of experience in Ubuntu and snaps.
So, I'm first going to talk about what Snapcrafters is specifically, because we're both Snapcrafters. Then I'm going to talk about a very simple introduction, how to snap Windows applications. Lucy is going to talk about the history of snapping Windows applications. Then I'm going to do a deep dive into how this project actually works. Lucy is, I'm going to talk about a few useful tools for creating snaps of Windows applications. And Lucy will be talking about a few useful tools to create snap applications in general. So, Snapcrafters itself, this project is under the Snapcrafters umbrella, and we are a group of volunteers who create snap packages to easily install third-party applications on Linux. So the idea is that the Snap Store, the idea of the Snap Store is that developers themselves can publish the applications into the store, but if developers don't want to do that or don't want to do that yet, then Snapcrafters can maintain some applications into the Snap Store. Currently, we're maintaining 37 snaps with a team of 33 volunteers, and all these snaps combined have over 1.5 million weekly active users across 57 distributions. And I checked it because I was incredibly surprised by how many different distributions there are. I didn't even know there were 57 different distributions, let alone ones that run our applications. And so Snapcrafters is the umbrella under which we are creating tooling for snapping Windows applications. So, how does this work? First, I have to talk a little bit about...
Your mic is not working right now.
First, I have to talk a little bit about how snap applications, how you can create snaps themselves. So you start with a snapcraft.yaml file. In this file, which you see here, you basically describe everything that is...
Try again.
Test. This seems to be working again.
That was on mute.
Which one?
This one was on
This
mute.
one?
This one was on mute. I've just
Test.
unmuted it.
I'm not sure. So I have to
Yeah.
That one is, yeah.
All right. So you start with snapcraft.yaml file, which basically describes everything that's required to build and run your application. You run the snapcraft command, which creates the snap, which is an installer for your application. You push it to the store using snapcraft push. And then it is available into the store under, for example, snapcraft.io/kcalc. Then users can install the snap very easily just by running sudo snap install kcalc. However, when you go and look into the Snap Store, you will see that there's a bunch of Windows applications in this store. A bunch of applications that only run on Windows normally, that don't run on Linux. However, users can easily install such applications like Notepad++ by simply running sudo snap install Notepad++. So how does this work? This works using Sommelier Core. It is a bunch of helper tools. There are a bunch of helper tools to easily create snap packages for Windows applications. They do a whole bunch of things. They connect this Windows application to the actual Wine binaries. You can use them to install a whole bunch of Wine tricks which modify the Windows environment so that the application runs correctly. They install a beautiful theme. You can also use them to actually download the application for you, and so you can use them to run applications in Wine. And so how you use it is basically you update the snapcraft.yaml file to include a whole bunch of things of Sommelier. So the first thing you do is add Sommelier itself to your application, which you do by including this bit. Then you add the Wine content snaps. You don't have to install Wine yourself, neither in the snap nor users manually having to install Wine. This is all done automatically simply by connecting your application to the Wine content snaps. And then you add your application-specific config. This can... Test 1, 2.
Yeah.
That one's working. Test 1, 2. Yeah. This seems to be working. All right, so the third thing is that you add the configuration for your application itself. This can include, for example, the path that would be the executable for your application on Windows. You can just add it as a Windows path, and a URL where they can download the installer, for example, or you can ship the installer in your application if you have the correct licenses for that. So the result is that when a user installs your application, the first thing they will see is this dialog, which is preparing the Windows environment for your application. Then they will see the installer of your application which is running, or they won't see the installer if you have an installer that can run in silent mode. They will just see a loading screen. And then they can play your game, for example. This is a Windows game running inside of a Snap. So let's move on to the history of Windows Snaps. First we had a game. Martin Wimpress, who used to run the Snapcrafters community initiative, he's very much into his racing games, and combined with his colleague Alan Pope, they came together to make a snap of one of his favorite games, which we've already shown a screenshot of. That's called Trackmania Nations Forever. So it's freely available, so we can redistribute it as we need. It was very much a scratch your own issue for Martin and Alan. I didn't see you add that bit. Martin has lost a few tournaments, and the Snap we're blaming for it. There's
Well, say there's a interface issue. So now you can install that and play anytime you want. From there, the community moved on to create an editor. This was Taki, yes, Taki Raza, who's quite a prolific snapcrafter themselves. The editor itself is Notepad++. It's open source, but it only runs on Windows because it uses Windows-specific API calls. Among Windows enthusiasts, it's quite a popular editor. And so from these humble beginnings, we came together to create Sommelier. So I think the primary packaging was built by Alan Pope. It was mainly based on the Trackmania Nations Forever snap code. I added some of the Notepad++ improvements that Taki added. And I uploaded it to the Snapcrafters GitHub organization. Sorry, it's been a long day. And I set it to be a template, so anyone who wants to use Sommelier can just click on a button to use this template on GitHub. Other improvements that I added initial support for hooks, which allow you to alter the behavior of Sommelier during installation and startup time. I also added environment variable usage to control a bit more behavior. The available hooks are snap post install, so anytime you want to run a hook, you can run it after the install is complete, after the snap has stopped, before the install is complete, and before the install starts. Merlin added some extra features. So Merlin helped to make the launch script much more generic. That enables us to use it in a much wider set of scenarios. And Merlin also converted it to use the wine content snaps that Taki also produces for us. And we've also now got the GNOME extension added, again, thanks to Merlin. So now we can snap all of them. We've got many wine snaps, as Merlin has already alluded to, and we're taking community contributions to add new features and bug fixes. So if you want to help out, then please do.
So I'll give a little bit more information about how some features in Sommelier work. One of the examples is, one of the useful things is wine tricks. So if you're not familiar with how wine works, sometimes Windows applications running inside of wine need additional configuration options, registry changes, or need certain Windows binaries that need to be downloaded and installed inside of the wine environment for the application to work. And Winetricks is a popular project in order to do that. So we created it so that you can use Winetricks very easily inside of your Snap, for your application. And you basically do that by changing environment variables in your snapcraft.yaml file. So for example, some applications need Microsoft Core fonts. You can add that functionality simply by adding core fonts in the tricks environment variable, which is how a how Winetricks calls the actions. You can also take multiple Winetricks actions by simply adding a list of them, a space-separated list of the actions. So for example, if your application needs the VC runtime of Microsoft or needs .NET, you can simply add those as tricks to your snapcraft.yaml file. In order to figure out what tricks you need,
it's very useful to go to either Wine AppDB or ProtonDB, because a lot of the comments that are associated with the listings of the applications, a lot of the comments explain what things you need to do in order to make your application work in Wine. And so those are the exact things you need to do then in order to make your application work inside of a Snap. As Lucy already alluded to, you can also customize the script itself using hooks. So for example, if you have certain logic that needs to run before your application starts or after your application shuts down, you can simply create a bash script, put it in one of those folders, and then it will run at a certain point in your in the life cycle of the application. We also added a theme. On the left, you see the default Wine look, which is not very beautiful, which is based on how Windows 95 looked. But on the right, you see we added the Upstream Light theme created by this person that is in one of the next Wine releases, will also become the default theme for Wine applications. But for previous releases, we added ourselves too. You can also turn it off simply by setting an environment variable. We also add content snaps. Content snaps is a very easy way for us to make sure that the application doesn't take too much resources on your system. Because a snap, it is a self-contained application. That means that any dependencies that it uses, even the Wine runtime itself, need to be packaged inside of that snap. We circumvent that by using content snaps. So you can choose a content snap with a certain Wine version that will be installed separately, and any Wine application on your system will use that same content snap. So instead of the data being duplicated in each and every single application, it's actually only once on your system. We do the same with the runtime. Those are basically all the dependencies that Wine needs in order to run. And we also do it with GNOME, all the desktop integration bits and the bits to make sure that GPUs work and things like that. Those are all also part of another content snap that most users already have installed on their system, so that your application doesn't take too much resources. There are a bunch of useful tools that can help you create Wine snaps. The first tool is the Universal Silent Switch Finder. So it's very easy, it's very user-friendly if a user simply clicks install this application, and then the application installs in the background. However, even though many installers have switches in order to make them install silently, they don't have that documented, and there's not a standardized way to figure out what those switches are, so you can run this program. However, important to note here is that this program sadly does not run in Wine itself, so you need Windows or in a virtual machine in order to run it. We also have Resource Hacker. Resource Hacker does run in Wine, and so you can simply install Resource Hacker on Linux by running snap install Resource Hacker, and you can use this in order to inspect Windows binaries, in order to extract things like who created this binary, what is the license, what is the icon for the binary, very useful for creating snaps and figuring out what you're actually working with. Then you can also change the registry. The Sommelier project also makes this very easy. You just run the name of, so after you created the snap and you install the snap, then users can just run the name of your application .wine space regedit, and then they have a Windows registry editor where they can change registry keys. You can use this yourself during development to debug certain things. And in the same line, you can also start wine config simply by running the name of your app .wine space wine config. And you can use wine config, for example, to make Wine appear as other Windows versions. By default, Wine makes itself appear as Windows 7, but you can also make it appear as older or newer Windows versions. You can also use that to change themes or to change certain dependency libraries.
So there are various tools that the Snapcraft ecosystem provides that you can use to debug your Snap. So the first thing you want to try is, when you're building your Snap for the first time, is to use Snap Try. So when you've got a build that completes, you can then build it with Snapcraft Try. This creates it in a special way so that the file system doesn't get packaged as a SquashFS file system, but actually gets put on your local hard drive as a folder. And then you can use snap try with the path to that folder. It's usually called prime, and it's usually in the folder that you execute Snapcraft from. When you do that, it will install the snap as though it was in a SquashFS file system, but it will be referencing the files that are in the prime directory. This allows you to modify any files in the directory so that you can experiment with any modifications that you need to try to figure out an issue that you're having. You can also start a shell inside of the Snap environment. This allows you to inspect the environment that the Snap daemon sets up for your app. You can also check to see what the confinement is allowing you to access, so you can try accessing, say, files or devices that aren't that you're not sure if you can access, and see if you get a permission denied. If you do, then you know that the sandbox is restricting you, and you probably need a new interface added. You can experiment with launching your app to see if it itself can launch. This enables you to get a complete log of how it's running. So you launch the shell with snap run -- shell and then the name of your snap. You can also use dev mode, which installs the snap as though it's confined, but all confinement enforcement is turned off. This enables you to use a program called Snappy Debug, which is available in the Snap Store. That is a terminal app that you can run alongside your app while you launch it. It will print onto the terminal any confinement rules that are causing your app, or that would cause your app to not work if it was enforced. So a common way of running that is to start your app in one terminal and have Snappy Debug running in the second terminal. Is that it? Yeah. Okay, that's it. Okay, so we're on to Q&A then.
If you're interested in following our work, we also put our Mastodon, what do you call it? Mastodon handles on there. Also take a look at the sponsor pages of some of the developers. Some of these people are doing really important work, making sure that all these wine snaps keep on running. Personally, I like this project from the standpoint of running Windows applications on Linux, but I also really like this project because it allows us to preserve some older Windows applications that are normally incredibly hard to run. So for example, if you're interested in running very early games or early age Windows software, things like Command and Conquer, the original Command and Conquer, there's very easy snaps now in order to be able to run that on a modern Linux distribution. All right, thanks for your attention.
Thank you everyone for watching this presentation, and thank you, Lucy. Thank you both of you for the presentation. Really interesting. We don't have questions at the moment. I know that the connection online is slightly later, so maybe something will arrive later. I encourage all to write in the Telegram chat if you have any questions. And if you want to take a look anyways in the YouTube chat, there are lots of comments. So just feel free to do that. Thank you, everyone. Stay around for the next presentation. Thanks.
Hi. Hey, hey.
Oh yeah.
Do you have
Yeah. Okay.
do you have earbuds with you?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I can get out of my backpack in a second.
Yeah,
Okay.
that'll be good.
Yeah.
Just give him the microphone.
Sure. Okay. Hi, everyone. Welcome to our accessibility workshop. I'm Heather. This is my buddy Jeremy. We work together. And yeah, let's see. We work at Canonical, and we care about accessibility and noticed some gaps, and thought we would take this opportunity to get developers more familiar with some of the accessibility tools and recognize where some of the gaps were, and to just kind of bring more awareness so that we can have it at the front of mind. So here, you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Jeremy Bika, and I work on packaging GNOME packages for Debian and Ubuntu.
Cool. So we have some actual workshop stuff, but first we wanted to kind of set the stage with some slides so you guys see this. Okay. Like I said, setting the stage. So we're going to use Orca and Inkscape. So if you want to, take action during this workshop, you can go ahead and install those however you like. Both of those are available in FlatHub and the Snap Store and the archive. So very, very widely available. Yeah, it's even in the Arch repos, OpenSUSE, very, very. There's also Apostrophe and Wiki. And we have some headphones. Oh! Sorry for the expletive. So we had envisioned that everybody would be using, here, there you go. Hold on to that while I dig out the headphones. Okay, so yeah, we have headphones for folks. If you need a pair of headphones, because we don't want everybody's computer to be chattering at them. It'll be loud and chaotic. So Orca is a screen reader that's going to be talking to you. And if you don't have headphones, we have a rainbow of colors. So you can have a free pair of headphones. These are brand new, unused. You can keep them. They're probably not great quality. Just going to be honest.
They're lovely, though.
But they're very pretty. Yeah. Okay, so what are these things that we're talking about? So Orca is a free and open source, a flexible and extensible screen reader. It provides access to the graphical desktop for visually impaired users. It works on most GTK3 apps to some extent, right? Everything's going to have an asterisk implied here. And it works with some, but not all installers. Inkscape is a free and open source vector graphics editor. If anybody's ever needed to just draw a box on a picture, Inkscape is great for that. It's available kind of everywhere. And it is a GTK3 app that is widely available. So that is kind of why we chose that as our example. We tried some other things in preparation for this workshop. Firefox, Chromium, and Epiphany. We found that Firefox, at first we thought that the screen reader didn't work, but it turns out that it does if you start the screen reader before you start Firefox. That's unfortunate. Chromium, it straight up does work. So you can have Chromium open, then go enable the screen reader, and then it seems to work fairly well. It works with Epiphany, with an older version that has GNOME 43, but not with the newer GNOME 44 one. One thing to note is that you have to hold F7 to enable like the caret mode for the Chromium web browser. It affects like how the web navigation works, and it's essential for using the screen reader. We took a look also, just in general, what the accessibility landscape looks like in GNOME, and this is, we're not experts in this space, we just started looking into it. So this is just a few things that we tried, some things that work, some things that don't. As we kind of mentioned, the Chromium Snap, Epiphany, and Inkscape, GTK4 apps weren't as great. Firefox, well, we thought didn't work, but then it turns out it does under conditions, right? And then we already mentioned Epiphany. And we looked at KDE as well. Yeah, so we tried Orca with Chromium, Ocular, Kate. One cool thing that KDE has that didn't seem obvious in GNOME was that they have these color schemes. But yeah, so you can go add like a filter, or a color scheme that will help folks with like red-green color blindness. Oh, yeah. Okay, so yeah, we want to encourage people to turn your screen reader on and open various apps like Inkscape, whatever else you would like to do, and kind of ask yourself some questions. Can you understand what the speech is saying? We're Americans, so we speak English, but it's amazing to have people that understand other languages to ask themselves, do the translations work well? Is there speech for all of the text elements that you would expect? So try and put yourself in the situation of someone that can't see very well, if they need to navigate and do all of the things. As someone brought up not long ago, it's like, well, if you're visually impaired, then maybe Inkscape is not going to be like your go-to tool for a lot of things, which is fair. But still, let's give it a shot. Is there too much speech or not enough? Would you be able to just like close your eyes and figure this out based on the speech, right? Because that would be what a blind person would need. And ultimately, you want to poke around and you want to file bugs. That's how we get awareness to the gaps so that they can be solved. So, you want to take it over?
Okay. Hi. Are you going to come back to this part then? Next steps?
Yeah, because we were going to
Okay.
hang out on the other.
Yep. I added a little bit more, so.
Oh.
Here we go.
Oh. Okay.
Okay.
Sure.
So let's show you how you turn on the screen reader then. So you'd want to have your earbuds or headphones in now. Hello. Okay, so for KDE, we noticed that KDE distros don't tend to have a screen reader pre-installed, but you can install Orca. When you do install Orca, I'm going to skip way back to an earlier slide. On this slide, if you install Orca, then the system settings app will show under personalization, accessibility. There'll be an extra widget there showing on for you to be able to turn on the screen reader. And then for GNOME, yeah, it was. I can also show this way. So in GNOME, you can also open the Settings app and scroll down to Accessibility. And this is GNOME 44. In previous versions of GNOME, it works basically the same way, except that it's on a single page instead of a subpage here. So under Seeing, then there's Screen Reader here at the bottom, and you can just turn that on. Yep, it's talking to me. When you enable it in GNOME, then you'll have an accessibility menu. There we go. It's distracting having it talking to me while I'm trying to talk. You have an accessibility menu that will pop up in the top, and Screen Reader is on. The way it was designed was this menu only shows up when one of these options is checked. If you turn off the last one, then it will disappear. So I'll do that, and it disappeared. So if you go back to the top part of accessibility, and you can tell it to always be on, and then it won't disappear anymore, and so you can easily turn it off and on that way. Also, there's a keyboard shortcut to turn it off and on. I believe it's the Windows key, Alt-S, will turn it on and then turn it back off again. So that's pretty useful if you are done testing it for a moment and you want it to stop talking. I guess the mute button will work also. That's what I did here. So I wanted to show an example of good accessibility for Orca. And you can do that by opening the Preferences app for Orca. You could do this with the keyboard shortcut Insert and Space. I noticed that this doesn't work if you had like a web browser focused or like a text editor because of the way the input mode is different. We briefly talked about that with web browsers. And I think there's a way you can temporarily disable that mode, but I don't know the advanced Orca feature, so just otherwise that should work. And when, so let me do that on my screen. Turn my screen reader back on. So the keyboard shortcut only works when Orca is playing. And then it opens up for me. The first item here is desktop mode and laptop mode. In desktop mode, the keyboard shortcut, the modifier, they call it the Orca modifier key, is the insert key. So insert and space opens this up. In laptop mode, caps lock becomes the modifier key, so caps lock and space would open this. The main difference besides that in laptop mode is that desktop mode uses the number pad as part of its different keyboard shortcuts for a more advanced functionality, and laptops often don't have a separate number pad, so the keyboard shortcuts are different to accommodate for that. And there's a lot of options in here, but if you have your screen reader turned on, you can hear it, and you can navigate using the tab key. And Orca does a good job of reading the label, the frame label at the top. So it'll read progress bar updates and speak updates. And you can navigate with the arrow keys. So if anyone doesn't have headphones on, I can, let's see how we want to do this. Unplug this. Maybe we can have a talk.
Braille updates checkbox not checked. Beep updates checkbox not checked. Tab. Frequency left paren, sex right paren, colon. 10 spin button. Tab. Applies to colon. Combo box. F5.
Okay, and I'll turn that off for now. Yes, that's plenty. Just showing an example for anyone that didn't have their headphones on then.
Yeah.
But it was nice. It read the label and it read what kind of widget it was for each of those. So I can show another example then with Inkscape. New document's fine. So one of the things that we want to try to do is not just use your mouse to navigate, but use your keyboard to navigate. So to get to the menu bar at the top of the screen, you can use the keyboard shortcut Alt. If you hold it down, it shows you letters for the different options. So in the edit menu, I think is what we want. Yeah, edit menu. And then I used my up arrow to get the preferences and open that. So the only thing I'm showing you in Inkscape is the preferences dialog. And it works fairly well. You can use the tab key to move your keyboard focus from the sidebar to the individual widgets that you're on. One thing I found interesting was in Inkscape, they've added tooltips, which are these little hint suggestions telling you what's going on. They've added that to like everything, and Orca reads off that tooltip thing by default. I believe in preferences you can turn off the tooltip reading in Orca's preferences. However, it's not reading the frame. In GTK, we call this a frame, where it has a title for a section. In older versions of GTK, older human interface guidelines, they often would have a box surrounding all of these items, but to make things a cleaner, simpler interface, the outline is no longer visible around that. So there can be very useful information in that title, and because the title is not being read, then someone who can't see the screen is missing out on useful information. To get back to the sidebar, I found that the arrow key left. Oh, actually, Shift Tab got me back here. On this one, this is an expander, and I figured out that the plus key opens this, so I'm doing Shift on my English US keyboard. Shift plus opens that, and
right arrow or left arrow close it?
Nope. So yeah, these things are a little bit odd if you have to like experiment with stuff. So if plus opens it, then minus closes it. So I press my minus key, and then it unexpands it. On this text one, I found an interesting issue. If I go down to additional font directories, I navigated down with my arrow key, and then I was unable to figure out any way to get out of this with my keyboard focus. I'm stuck inside this widget. Maybe there's some other way that I don't know about, but I could not figure that out. So that's a problem for keyboard accessibility if you stumbled into, what's that? Control tab, okay. Ah, there we go, we're out, thank you. we have a GTK developer, Matthias here, that can help me know what's going on. Okay. One other thing I'll demonstrate in Inkscape, and this is also in File, New from Template. I found this.
Do you want some headphones?
I found that this was inaccessible. It's not navigable very well if you can't see the screen. It doesn't work well at all. Oh, that's cool. That's a missing dependency it's complaining about. And then that part crashed. But anyway, that was all I had for Inkscape.
Yeah, let me go back to the other slides, if that's okay, and talk about the other types of accessibility in our last like 10-ish minutes.
Okay. And if we have more time, I have some other apps. But
yeah, okay. There. Where is the presentation? That's it.
There you go.
And which direction?
Left.
It's not working?
Maybe the screen reader's causing issues, so.
Could be.
We can turn it off.
Yeah. Oh, you're doing page app, okay. Yeah, so yeah, Jeremy briefly talked about like Orca, that it helps for, visually disabled people, but what about other things? There's typing assist. There's a whole on-screen keyboard. Many of us use on-screen keyboards daily on our phones, tablets. We need it for the desktop as well. We can talk about color blindness, which we did briefly with like the color schemes, and large font. With Zoom, so in GNOME, there's like a zoom factor, but there seems to be like almost kind of size limits there. I had a user report, like an issue, they were using like 6x zoom, but then the window would like refocus when they started typing in LibreOffice, and that was a real big hindrance to that person. So yeah, we should be mindful of like, what are the limitations of the accessible tools that we're providing? And then, yeah, are those limitations imposed by like interaction with the shell or the app itself? So color blindness, I didn't actually know that it was so ubiquitous, but apparently it affects 1 in 12 men and 1 in 200 women. So it's like more prevalent, and way more prevalent in men. This is probably why I didn't realize it. So there are useful tools that can help users and developers. As we mentioned, like KDE has the color schemes. And as I mentioned in the panel, which actually was Jeremy's idea, is that we should have maybe like a standalone app that would help simulate an environment for you to test your application to see how accessible it is. And I think this is already a standard in GNOME, but buttons and indicators should use text and colors, not just like a red button. And sufficiently high contrast for the font, the cursor, the images. Right? I think that's improving. And there's probably many other ideas that, collectively we could come up with. Yeah, as I said, like we use on-screen keyboards all the time, so we need to think about how that would work on the workstation as well. Yeah, we could look at like different keyboard layouts if they're supported. What is the OSK not providing? How does it work, with feature parity between like X and Wayland, right? As we move forward in the Wayland space. Right, so we can keep in mind like the zoom factor limitations, and we kind of looked at Orca. So the GitLab on GNOME has an accessibility label that you can use, and there's an A11Y chat channel that you can go and report issues in an issue tracker, really, but you can go and have conversations around accessibility. And yeah, you've added a bunch of links here. Do you want to finish it off?
Yep. So I wanted to briefly mention 2 other apps. I'm not going to show you Wiki today, but it is a reader for Wikipedia. Pretty cool app. If you try to use it in Orca, you'll see that it's the browser part. It's basically an embedded web browser. it's not accessible, and I believe they just need to implement the carrot mode kind of feature that we were talking about with web browsers. And then I can show, and we'll have these slides available on the LOS website a little bit later. I wanted to briefly show the Apostrophe app. Apostrophe is a Markdown reader app. And the first thing I tried to do was to access the header bar, the widget at the top of the page, and I was unable to find any keyboard shortcut. None of the standard ones worked to access the header bar. So that's a bug that I'll be filing later. I believe Apostrophe has switched to GTK4 in their Git repo. They've just not done a release of it yet. So there's a chance that has been fixed, but I think they just didn't notice that that was an issue there. If you also go into preferences, this is also not very navigable with a keyboard either. So those are some examples of issues. They also don't have relationships between the on-off switch and the label that describes what it does. So in GTK, you can set a label relationship between the two items to fix that bug. To open the menu bar, there's commonly F10 would normally get you to the menu bar. It just doesn't work in this app. I think that we don't, in GNOME, we don't yet have full standardization on how to access the header bar with what exact keyboard shortcuts were. It's approximately F10 or Alt F10, but specifics of how to navigate the other buttons besides the menu bar, I think, are still left to be defined. So that's it for those apps. The apps that we chose today were all GTK-free apps. If you would try a GTK4 app instead, like the GNOME Control Center app, there's some major missing features there. I noticed that in a list box, that it would read the first item in the list and then not read any of the other items in the list box. In GNOME, a lot of the GTK4 apps are using the libidwayata library, and so I'm not sure if some of the issues need to be fixed on the GTK side or on the libidwayata side. The developers are aware of them. It's just that, unfortunately, accessibility hasn't been prioritized enough with funding and things to completely fix all the issues. So it's being worked on. Things are getting better gradually over time, but there's still a ways to go. In Epiphany, the web view, the main point of the web browser is inaccessible. It's completely silent when I would try to navigate there. But that's all for the content I had. If anyone had anything they wanted, questions or discussion, we don't really have extra microphones, but you can probably just speak up and it will be fine. Yes. So I'll try to summarize what you asked. He asked the apps that I showed today, would they seem to be developed for visual users? And also you were asking if there's examples of apps that were designed well for non-visual users. And for that, the best one that I found was the Orca preferences dialog, which makes sense because that's specifically for people that need a screen reader. So for that preferences app, that's well tested by people that are using that. Okay, thank you very much for your time. And this shows us where we can work in the future to make things better for everyone.
Thank you, everyone. So now we are going to continue with the Fedora Ubuntu party, which is downstairs. Everything is ready. Feel free to join the party and enjoy the evening. Thank you everyone who is following online. Have a nice continuation. Have a nice day or evening, depending wherever you are. See you tomorrow morning with new presentation and new speakers. Bye.